Hey, I'm Gus Sproul. I'm the Scottish Regional Chair. I'm here with John McKenzie, Scottish Regional Secretary, and Colin Brown, the Executive Council Member for Scotland. Colin, following the result of the consultative ballot, the EC met. Do you want to give the members a bit of an update as to what you were talking about in that meeting?
Yeah, so EC met 14th and 15th of November, immediately following the outcome of the ballot and the announcement of the result. It's about next steps. So there was a all-member circular issued by FBU head office. Just pull it up so I give you the right dates. That was issued on the 16th. It's available on the FBU national website, outlining the progress and where we go from here and the next steps. So yesterday, the General Secretary wrote to the clerks of each of the fire and rescue services and the ministers of the devolved governments and the UK government, informing them that we will be entering into a trade dispute over firefighter pay. The next steps on that is the 28th of November, when we legally have to notify employers that we will be balloting our members for strike action. That will be sent out on the 5th of December with an agreed 7-week ballot period to run until the 23rd of January. The reason for such an extended ballot is obviously, Christmas and New Year is never a great time to be trying to organise and mobilise members for any action, never mind strike action. But equally, CWU, the posties, have given dates for industrial action, and they've indicated for every day's action they take, it has a ripple effect through the postal service that lasts 2 to 3 days, in that there's a backlog of mail for the days that they've taken action that takes them a number of days to sort out. So for every 1 day's action, if there's 2 days impacted or 3 days impacted, you can see how we lose weeks very, very quickly for every 2nd day, every 3rd day, every 4th day that CWU take action. That impacts how the ballot papers go out to members' home addresses, but equally when ballot papers are returned, it impacts that. To put that in context, you don't just put 33,000 ballot papers into a postbox and they filter through the system. It is a really significant operation to send that number of ballot papers out in one go and ensure they reach every corner of the country. So that's the process now. There is a conversation that the EC needs to have of as much as the 23rd of January as an agreed date, and that's been announced to members. CWU have announced industrial action into January as well. So there will be that knock-on effect from their actions. So the EC need to consider that, and we will obviously communicate that out to members. But for now, 5th of December for ballot papers coming out, 23rd of January for close of ballot. And we would encourage members to return their ballot as early as possible to ensure that it filters through the postal service as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and with this being a legislative ballot, there will be no online option as per the trade union legislation. Okay, thanks for that, Col. And then following that, John, there was a regional secretaries meeting that you attended. Do you want to give us a wee update? I think it was similar content to what Colin talked about there, but I'm sure there's a few other things that you were discussing.
Aye, very much so, Gus. So the following 2 days after the EC met, the regional secretaries met. Colin's covered a range of the issues that were discussed, as you can imagine, the pertinent issues that we're dealing with at the moment throughout what has now been registered as this dispute. But we also spoke about, look, what we're trying to do here, what the union, what our members are trying to do here is achieve an acceptable pay proposal. That's what we're trying to achieve. That's the site of where we're trying to go with this. We've seen the action that has been taking place since we received the initial offer on the 27th of June. That offer was 2%. Through FBU members' efforts and organisation, that was eventually improved to 5%. That wouldn't have happened if FBU hadn't taken the position we had, our members hadn't been so engaged and organised. What we're trying to do now is improve that offer again. Improve that offer again to somewhere that's acceptable for our members. And there's a number of things that we need to do to escalate the situation to get that resolution. So the key dates Colin's covered at the ballot, but what we need to do is bring political pressure. Right, where decisions need to be changed here, ultimately the minds we need to change are politicians sitting at Westminster who hold the purse strings. That's where we need to apply pressure. And that's why Colin's touched on the ballot opening on the 5th of December. The day after that ballot opens, on Tuesday, the 6th of December at Westminster Parliament, the FBU will be holding a mass members lobby, mass member lobby of FBU members, and that very much is to bring that political pressure. Now, there'll be 2 things there. First of all, we'll all recall our own mass member lobby of Parliament that we did at Holyrood just a matter of weeks ago. That was exceptionally successful. Members in Scotland absolutely did themselves proud. And, you know, they need to be confident and recognise that wasn't just recognised at Holyrood, that was recognised throughout the structures of the union. We had over 700 members there. Isn't it outstanding turnout? We need to replicate that. We need to take hundreds of members down the road to Westminster. Now, there's information that's out there on branches. Contact your area officials if you haven't seen it. Further information will go out this week. We are looking to lobby significant number of members to Westminster. And there's two things we're trying to achieve there. Political recognition, have the issue front and centre in the media, the public's consciousness, and politicians will gauge. We spoke about this at Holyrood. Politicians will gauge how seriously our members take this issue in terms of their engagement. If we rock up with low hundreds of members, they aren't going to see a union, a workforce that are engaged in this issue. If we rock up with thousands of members, they will have to pay attention. They will have to invest in this. So there is that, and we'll be looking for members to write to and lobby their MPs. So that's the most significant, that was a significant part of the debate at the Regional Secretaries meeting of last week.
Yeah, so we took the fight to the Scottish Parliament, and now it's about taking that fight down the road to Westminster, where ultimately the purse strings are held. So that brings me on to the question that, is a ballot for strike action inevitable then? Is it inevitable that we're going to be heading for a strike? Colin?
Absolutely not. It's likely, and increasingly likely with every day that goes past. The UK government still have time to get back to the NGIC employer side and let them know that they're willing to fund fire and rescue services. That is the reality. That's where this conversation needs to happen. As John's touched on, the lobby at the Westminster Parliament is about firefighters making that case to their elected MPs. And that's the important part, is they are our MPs and they need to hear directly from firefighters just how invested we are and just how important what firefighters really do on a daily basis is. I've touched on this before, hear from politicians and others that there's fewer fires, so we need fewer firefighters. I'd like to hear any firefighter make that argument, because we know that the reason there's fewer fires is because the work that every one of us do in the communities on a daily basis. So that needs to be hammered home. It's absolutely not inevitable that we go to strike action. There is still time for the employers and governments to provide additional funding in order to pay firefighters a meaningful increase in their wages that, you know, allows firefighters to survive the cost of living crisis that we're living through right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier on. Sorry, on you go, John.
No, well, look, thanks, Gus. Just on the back of that, we have a window. Members have a window of opportunity for the next 2 months to avoid or to help avoid industrial action. And that is through members participating in high numbers, 1, in the demo, 2, participating in the ballot, because the participation levels and the outcome of that ballot will create significant political leverage for us. It will show the government how seriously our members take this issue, what they are prepared to do to resolve it. So there are things members can do over the coming 2 months that will significantly strengthen our position, make it very clear to politicians who hold the purse strings how serious they are about this issue, and ultimately leverage our position to reach a settlement.
Thanks, John. No, it's an important point. Colin, you talked about the GenSec has written to the clerks of the various different fire and rescue authorities. The door's still open. The FBU is still wanting to negotiate this. The FBU wants to come to a settlement. The GenSec has written to those people. Have we had any meetings with the Home Office?
There have been meetings with the Home Office. Obviously, the debate and the conversation that happens in those meetings is embargoed to those meetings until there's an agreement to release that. It's obviously live. These conversations will continue throughout and beyond the members' ballot. And whatever the result of that will be, negotiations will continue and conversations will continue. You know, we're 20 years since there was a national, as in UK-wide, industrial action. That shows just how seriously the FBU are about negotiating positions with employers and with governments. It's not something that we take lightly. It's not something we advise members to do lightly. So we are in that position now where we're hitting a wall. We're hitting a wall with negotiations, and essentially, as an executive council member, I feel our hand's been forced to take it to the point where members are being advised to withdraw their labour. That's the ultimate right of any worker. Yeah,
we've been getting pushed into this corner for a decade now. So talking of industrial action, we're continuing to ask what form that'll take. Is the Executive Council at a position to put forward the strategy, or have we come up with the strategy just now? What kind of shape do you see the industrial action taking?
fundamentally, it has to be strike action. There is an argument and there's an absolutely live conversation about action short of strike, but the biggest impact, bearing in mind that nowadays arguments, battles, fights, whatever way you want to describe it, are won with hearts and minds. It's not going to have the impact at the level that we need it to, us taking action short of strike. So we've seen through COVID that fire services can run to an extent with appliances off the run and reduced numbers. The public were massively unaware of the reality on fire stations throughout COVID. We need the public to be aware that firefighters are not at their work because the government have forced a position where they can't afford to continue on this track. So there is a conversation around action short of strike. Members need to be conscious of their responsibilities in that and what action short of strike can and may look like. So overtime bans are one element that members keep coming back saying if we did an overtime ban, that would impact the service almost to the same extent as strike action. Possibly it would in some brigades and some regions. We wouldn't have the same visual as at full-on strike action with pickets outside fire stations. Members also need to consider that the FBU already has policy on gaffers not driving fire appliances. We know members do that because they're community minded and they want to ensure that their communities are protected and have fire cover. So they're willing to just bend the policies to an extent. But that would be action short of strike. Crew and watch commanders no longer being willing to drive fire appliances. Development of firefighters not being willing to drive fire appliances. And actually enforcing FBU policies where action short of strike restricts you to your role and not bending and flexing. So the impacts can be much greater on our members than a lot of people believe just an overtime ban would be. So the conversation's live at EC. We are collating the data as to the different duty systems that are worked and the different impacts that various types of action will happen and how that will impact individual members and maximise the impact of any of that action. So yeah, it's absolutely live right now, Gus. It's being strategised right now, but fundamentally, we need the strike action to make the strongest point to the people that need to hear it.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And interesting, the point you made about COVID, how we kind of, coped through COVID. That was a massive reduction of incident levels as well. We saw incident levels drop right down through lockdown and everything. So it didn't give a very accurate picture of what we can achieve on that kind of skeleton service. Okay, so getting more kind of locally, or back to things on a kind of more local level, we've seen communications go out from our service to retired members and to management sent out to try and gauge if people are willing to take part in industrial action or not. You got any thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, look, we recognise, just to touch on Colin's point there, I think he makes a really good one. And you've got to look at the government who we're trying to change minds on. You look at the right-wing Tory government that are currently in power, what type of action is it going to take to change hearts and minds there? It's going to take significant action. But no, look, getting on to your point, look, we recognise the service have got responsibilities to provide fire cover through periods of industrial dispute. That's the nature of the roles that come with those roles in the service. But ultimately, the only way we're going to make progress on this issue, the only way we're going to come out of a period of dispute which is now registered, the only way we're going to come out of any potential implications of balloting for industrial action and then that subsequent industrial action is reaching a settlement. Now, the way we're going to be able to reach a settlement is putting the maximum pressure on, as we spoke before, on that Westminster government and on the national employers. The best ways we can do that is having the most effective, organised, disciplined industrial action that we possibly can put into place. In order to do that, we need to maintain pickets, organised workplaces. Now, the employer is here right that employers have written to recently retired FBU members, recently retired firefighters, ultimately seeking if there was an expression of interest to carry out our roles where we're taking industrial action, effectively strike-breaking action. Look, all the feedback we've had from our many route retired and out of trade members is that they have declined that. They have declined that offer. We would expect, and I've had a number of retired members telling us this, that they would be joining us on picket lines rather than seeking to break picket lines. And what we would say to our retired members in the discussions we've had, and to be fair, our retired members are saying this loud and clear, is that ultimately undertaking that work is breaking picket lines. That is just the plain reality of what it is. Undertaking that work is breaking picket lines. And we are picketing, it comes back to the same point. we are talking about industrial action, we are talking about all types of industrial action and how that would materialise. We are doing that in order to get an improved pay offer and reach a settlement. That is what we're trying to achieve. All the action is designed to get to that point, but it's important that action needs to be effective as it possibly can be.
Yeah, thanks, John. Right, and getting back to, or speaking about other unions taking strike action, in 3 days' time, the Scottish Ambulance Service, or parts of unions that represent members within the Scottish Ambulance Service, are looking to be taking industrial action. Colin, you've got a partner who works within that industry. Can you give us a bit of an update on that and what involvement we may have in that, where the service's position is on it?
Yeah, the ambulance service and their unions obviously structure themselves differently. You know, the fire and rescue service or the fire brigades union, there are other unions out there, but they don't carry any real weight or capital within the sector, just on scale of numbers. Obviously, there's at least 3 different unions operate within the ambulance service, so there's a degree of coordination needs to happen there in order for them to take action that really impacts their service. But that's absolutely not to take away from the action that they're taking. The impact for our members is that we have a concern that the calls that sometimes slip through the call challenge by our members within control rooms and our officer members, that, you know, under the desire to do what we all want to do and provide that humanitarian service, often mobilised to some instance that we see as contractually outside our role right now. And that is part of a much bigger conversation that's still going on in Scotland and across the union nationally. We want members to remain vigilant to an increase in turnouts to EMR type work to support other services. There obviously is a SOP that the service brought in during COVID for the delayed attendance ambulance service that should not be being abused in order to provide cover for other sectors that are taking industrial action. We wouldn't want our members inadvertently being mobilised. That undermines the legitimate strike action and action short of strike being taken by other unions in other sectors. So if there are cases that are creeping through, that if there are increases in this incident turnouts that members feel are outside our role and are undermining other unions' industrial action, then report them through the structures and allow us to challenge that with the service. That's one of the conversations that we're having with the service right now. I know John met with senior managers today and had that conversation. We've got reassurances that there is not a policy in place. There's not a deliberate attempt for our sector and our service to undermine that action, but there will be incidents that slip through. So it's not a cast iron guarantee that no firefighter will turn out to an EMR job during that time, if that makes sense, Gus.
Yeah, John, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, look, I think just touching the role of our own union and very quickly and some other unions in the sector, there is only one effective union in the fire sector. There's only one union representing firefighters who sits in the National Joint Council negotiating our pay terms and conditions. There's only one union that took legal action through the courts to ultimately win members back their pensions and subsequent compensation on the back of it. There's only one union that ultimately the members of which took action, organised, mobilised themselves to improve that pay offer of 2% to 5% over the course of a number of months. And there's only one union in the fire sector that's talking about taking meaningful action to improve that offer further to a position that will be acceptable for members. And that's the Fire Brigades Union. We are, in reality, the only active, meaningful union within the fire sector in the UK. On that point that Colin spoke about, though, he's absolutely right. Look, going into periods of industrial action, we see already there's other sectors taking industrial action at this moment in time throughout other sectors. Some of them, emergency services, obviously have the ability to impact upon their members. But as we say, you know, the service in Scotland, there has been no indication to us in any way, shape or form that they will seek to mobilise our members to any turnouts out with role. That would be something we would challenge robustly at the best of times anyway, and that we do. Obviously, it has a potential to impact members of other emergency services, and in this instance, we're talking about paramedics taking industrial action. We may see an up spike in calls, but a recommendation to members would be, as it always is in these instances, respond to the incident, any concerns you have, feedback through the structures, through your branch officials and then subsequently area officials, and then it will be dealt with from there.
Thanks, John. And that probably leads into how important it is for workplace organising at the moment. That we've been doing a lot of work on that. I know the organisers have been working really, really hard on the compliance for the legislative ballot, but the importance of workplace organising couldn't be stressed highly enough just now.
Yeah, look, Colin touched on it earlier. He spoke about what an outstanding result the ballot was over a 2-week period, all the restrictions on it, both the participation and the vote. He's absolutely right, and it shows what our members are capable of doing. Our members showed what they're capable of doing when they pitched up in their many hundreds, over 700 of them, at Holyrood just the other week. Members, many members are asking, what can we do now? There are a couple of things that branches can be doing right now. It is absolutely imperative that we have in place. One, we've touched on already, mobilise, attend Westminster demonstration on the 6th of December. Secondly, organise your branch structures. This is imperative. If we ultimately the result we're looking to get in a ballot is an overwhelming vote supporting strike action. That, as we've spoken about, is the best way of leveraging a change of position from the Westminster government, and ultimately, ironically, avoiding taking any industrial action or needing to take any industrial action. So we need high participation in the ballot. That means discipline and organisation within workplaces and members taking responsibility for playing their part in that democratic process. What it also needs is if we get to a place where our members need to take industrial action, which they will have democratically agreed through ballot, then we need highly organised, disciplined workplaces picketing their workplaces. And in order for that organisation of members, good, clear communications through the structures, and good, clear communications within watches and workplaces, we need workplaces to be represented through branch officials. Now, our rule book tells us we should have a minimum of 3 branch officials on every whole-time branch. We should have a watch official on every watch. That's the way we structure and organise our workplaces. And let's be honest, that is exactly what we're going to need in place in every single workplace the length and breadth of Scotland, if we are going to maximise ultimately our leverage, organise ourselves properly, and get the pay offer and ultimately the resolution that our members deserve, which is an improvement upon what currently sits upon them. Members absolutely have the ability to influence that. So what I would encourage members to do, there'll be emergency area committee meetings called over the back end, the course of this year, over the coming weeks. It is exceptionally important that your branch is represented at that meeting. We can't have branches not represented. If your branch doesn't currently have branch officials in place, or doesn't currently have the full number of branch officials, you need to resolve that within the next few weeks. You need to have a branch meeting, you need to resolve that. Put these structures in place, organise your workplace, become a leader in your workplace, and let's get a pay offer that will be acceptable to our members and create the maximum leverage that we can to change the minds and decision makings at Westminster.
Thanks, John. You talked a wee bit there about discipline. It's really important that our members understand that where the fight here is, that it's not amongst people within the workplace, it's not with the local managers who are doing their job, going out and speaking to them and asking what they've been asked to ask them by their senior management. This is about, like you say, it's about taking the fight to the Westminster government.
Absolutely. Look, we've got members of all ranks, roles, duty systems throughout the Fire and Rescue Service. We represent them all. We are ultimately trying our level best to create the maximum pressure to get an improved pay offer for all of our members. The fight is with the politicians at Westminster. The fight is with the political decisions that have been made, the political choices that have been made that have led us to a position which we're in now, which is where we don't have an acceptable offer in front of us. And in order to improve that, we've been forced into a position of taking industrial action to do that. So that's ultimately where we are now. That's what we're looking to improve. And you're right, that discipline on stations, that reasonableness between members looking after each other and acting responsibly and in an organised way is really important. Let's focus the fight on where it needs to be. Let's mobilise our members. Let's raise public awareness, and let's make sure the politicians at Westminster who are making these decisions feel the consequences of those decisions.
Yeah, thanks, John. Colin, you came back briefly there. You might have frozen again. I think it has, John, but we were wrapping up there anyway. Listen, thanks very much for your input there, Regional Secretary John McKenzie and Executive Council Member Colin Brown.
Thanks, Gus. See you soon, man.
Cheers.